In this lecture, we're going to be talking about why context is important when reading the Bible. A lot of times it feels like we can approach the Bible and know nothing about it and just try to get a lot from it. For some reason, the Bible can be kind of in this other category from all other books, whether we're religious or not. Usually when you approach reading a book, you're going to look into some things like who the author is, what the book is about, if it's a fiction book or if it's nonfiction, or, we're going to find some of those details out. But sometimes because we approach the Bible in this other category, we don't do any of those things. And so in this lecture, I'm hopefully going to persuade you that knowing some things about the Bible before we actually approach reading it, or as we approach reading it, goes a long way in helping us understand what the original authors of the Bible were trying to tell us. So the fact is, we don't live in the same world in which the Bible was written. Yes, in kind of a broad sense, but more specifically, we're separated by many things that makes it difficult for us to just pick up the Bible and know exactly what the authors meant. We're separated by time, thousands of years. We're separated by geography, by culture, by language, and more. And so that can make it difficult to read the Bible and understand what it means. I think that's something that we all must recognize. It helps to just recognize that this world today is not the same world as what the Bible was written in. And so that's the first step, is acknowledgement that things are different, and we have to do some work to get back to that original place. And so that's why the illustration of a bridge is perfect. Because if we're going to understand the Bible, if we're going to understand what the biblical authors meant and what they wrote, we need a bridge between where we are today and where the Bible was written in. So, like I said, many years have passed. We're on a totally different side of the world. We are in a totally different culture. All of these things, a totally different language. And so, if we're going to get back to that place and get to a point of understanding, then we need a bridge to get there. And what I hope to persuade you of, is that context, studying the context, is that bridge. So, this bridge, as I just said, is formed through studying the original context. And something important about that is a lot of this work means taking ourselves mostly out of the picture. So we do this work in an objective sense of trying to put aside all of our assumptions, all of our preconceived notions about the things that are written in the Bible, and instead going back, crossing that bridge, studying the context to get to exactly what the biblical authors have to say, and not letting our ideas and our judgments cloud what the author was saying. So, if this all sounds crazy and you're like, okay, yeah, context, but what does that mean? How is that done? I want you to think about 4 areas of context that you can study that can help you make your way over that bridge. And those are a literary context, a grammatical context, historical, and cultural contexts. So, looking at each one a little bit closer, I want to tell you about kind of what this context means and what you could do to further study this. So, literary context is what it sounds like. It's all about how a book is written as a piece of literature. And the Bible, even though we want to put it in this other category oftentimes, it still is a piece of literature. And therefore, we need to pay attention to it as a piece of literature. We need to go back to thinking about, is this fiction? Is this nonfiction? But maybe even looking at it in more specific literary genres, such as, is this a letter, as we'll find in the New Testament? Is this a work of history? Is this a sort of biography, as we'll find in the Gospels? And so paying attention to those genres, recognizing those genres, and then recognizing that we'll read it in a different way based on what genre it is, that all helps us before we even approach the text. So, literary genres. And then another thing is looking for the author intended meaning. So, a lot of times, as we approach the Bible as this other book, we tend to put ourselves in the shoes of the audience, as as if, so we're reading the Bible, and we tend to think everything is about us. Not everyone, of course, but this is just a tendency that a lot of people have when we read the Bible, is that we put ourselves into the text and we totally forget about thinking what it was that the author intended. What did the author intend for this passage to mean, or for this book to mean? And we'll see how this is even more important in some cases, such as the letters of the New Testament that were written to specific people for a specific purpose at a specific time, and so on. But we just have to remember that we're trying to get back to what the author was writing, not the truth that we're trying to find today, not what the world says the meaning is, not what the reader says the meaning is, but we're going back to look for what did the author mean when the author wrote this. Now, a little caveat to this could be something that I don't want to spend too much time on, but this would just be the idea of Old Testament prophecies that most scholars say Jesus Christ, the Messiah, fulfilled in the New Testament. Now, probably in the Old Testament, when the Old Testament was written, these authors did not have specific details of Jesus Christ and the events that were going to happen in the New Testament. So that's kind of a caveat with the author intended meaning, because I think the perspective of most scholars would be that these Old Testament authors did not know the fullness of how God was going to work those prophecies in the New Testament. So, just a caveat there. Next is the grammatical context. We won't be spending much time on this this semester because this is just a survey class, and this would be primarily concerned with the original languages. So the Old Testament was originally written in Hebrew, and the New Testament was written in Greek. And so we're not going to be getting into a lot of that. But when someone is truly approaching the Bible to really, really study it, it really helps to know those original languages because it just opens up so much more meaning to us. So it's primarily concerned with original languages, but also it can help to pay attention to sentence structure, to verb tenses, to patterns in the text, basically anything that you would have learned in your like 5th grade grammar class, if they still have those. Those are the types of things that you're looking at in the grammatical context. Next is the historical context. So once again, thinking about the Bible in this other category where, we don't approach it in the same way that we do other books. What we don't want to do, we want to take this Bible and put it in with all other books and realize that the Bible is based on real events, real people, and a real time in history. And so that's what we're trying to get back to. We don't open the Bible and start reading it and, have no other basis to check the facts. The Bible was happening, the events of the New Testament were happening in a specific place, and we can look at history and we can see things are confirmed from the New Testament just because there are other things going on in the world. And so don't approach the Bible thinking that, these events cannot be backed up, or that you can't look at this as real history, because it is truly history. And so you can research the Bible as a piece of history just as you would any other nonfiction book of the past. So also it can be helpful as you study the historical context of say specific people groups in the New Testament or the Old. It helps to just look at what else was happening in the world when that text was written. Finally, the cultural context. This can be such a big one for us because, as I said, there are so many things about our culture today that are totally different from the culture of the New Testament. Just think about like our usage of technology. Just to give you these lectures, I'm using a phone, I'm using a laptop, I'm using a battery-powered light. So all of these things, that's just a silly example. But it shows that we just have to remind ourselves that the culture of today is not then. And so we want to study the lifestyles, the beliefs, the values, the ways of life of the people at that time that we're studying. And then it can also be helpful to pay attention to how the society is made up. So, what were gender roles like? How did people make their living? What did people believe? All of these things can help us learn more about the people and therefore about the New Testament. So, just to end this, without this bridge of context, yes, you can read the Bible, you can read the New Testament and the Old, and you likely will walk away learning some things if you are approaching it with the intention to learn. But what I hope you see is that without this bridge of context, without learning some things about the world in which the New Testament and the Old were written, you can miss out on the fullness of the meaning found in the Bible. So it's when you start to dig in and learn some things, some background information about what you're reading, about who the author was, about, things going on in history at that time. That's when you can really start to see what the Bible is about, and you can just see how your understanding of the Bible just blooms. And so, even though we won't have a lot of time throughout this semester to just dig and dig and dig into this, into context, I hope that through these lectures we are getting closer and closer to that mark. We're crossing that bridge just through your lecture material and the readings that you do. So, just be thinking about this bridge of context as you read the Bible.